So, let's start with the first question, please. Am I behind you? Sorry. Any question? Thank you.
Yeah, I was just thinking how. Oh, sorry. I was just thinking how fantastic a lot of the images are, and it's really amazing that you've been able to find them in the archives for both of you. And I was just wondering whether they're available at all for, like, how you think about how they should be shared now, and whether they're available for other people to see beyond, you know, the scope of this presentation. Like, are they available on the internet, or like how that can be taught to the younger generation, that history?
You go first.
I mean, anyone can go to the National Labour Movement archive, and the magazine Morgonbris is available for anyone to look at and to engage with. And also anyone can ask anyone can access the archival images. So that is not limited. However, what is a bit tricky though, which I haven't solved. I mean, all these posters and photographs are part of work I made, which is showing here and there. But every time I need to ask for permission to show the images, because even though there are no rights connected to the images anymore, because it's 70 years ago since the photographers died. But there are still there are certain rights connected to the archive themselves. So, but they are kind of very negotiable. So it is fairly easy to show them, but it still needs to be constantly negotiated. I mean, I think it would be amazing if they could just be part of a digital archive that anyone can access. But Göteborg has an amazing women's archive. Annika, what is it called? Kvinnsam, and there they have a lot of they've digitized a lot of images from the broad women's movement and also the early women's movement in Sweden. Not necessarily focusing on the socialist women's movement. They kind of have a broad, lot of different kind of photographs. Because what I also want to say is that the photographs I showed, what I find them really interesting is that there are a lot of photographs that photographers taken of women, like involved in labor or in the kitchen or taking care of children, and but there are not that many photographs that are these kinds, where they actually represent themselves or present themselves as a collective and as a struggling collective, and also they present themselves as intellectual beings, and that is I talked to a photo historian, and she says it's extremely rare for this time, at least in Sweden. I don't know about the other countries, but at least in Sweden it's super rare to see images of women involved in intellectual work and political work. So, that was a long answer to your question.
No, that's wonderful. My part, the photos of the 1979, the photographers is alive. I was doing my MA at Chelsea College of Art in London, and I attended a book launch, and there was a German artist, Sandra Scheffer. I flipped through her book and I saw that image, and I said, Sandra, is this Iran? And she said, yeah. The photographer is sitting by the audience. Maybe you go and talk. So she introduced us, and that was my first time meeting Hengame Golestan, the photographer in London, with that photo. So I was very curious to know about it. I didn't know. I really wanted to know more. And I started working with her. That is 2011. She has traveled around Iran, and she has lots of photos of Kurdish women. The one I just showed is the revolution, around the time of revolution. But her husband is a photojournalist, so she was traveling with her wherever he would go. So all the photos are during her activities is from 1978 to 1985. Then she moved to Britain. It's mainly about women. She would attend weddings in villages, and she would take photos of those. It's sort of, she moves between domestic woman's life and woman in public. So she has a very interesting archive arranged from those two. And not also in the city, but also in villages. So I quite like her archive in villages where she has taken photos. Yeah, so last summer I did an exhibition of those photos, just the one about the Iran Revolution at the showroom. Do you know showroom in London? So I did I co-curated with the showroom team the photos, and also showroom is more of a public platform, it's not a white cube gallery, as you may know. So we put the photos up, but we did like 2-day symposium, reading group, workshops, and a screening that could sort of engage the existing images with the current situation of that topic in Britain. And if I answer your question about sharing, it's when that happened. And we got very good press coverage, like CNN, Euronews, Guardian, British Journal of Photography, New York Times. And that was really the time I felt it's no longer about me, Hengame, Royal College of Art, no, showroom, no. It's a larger constellation that shaped within that topic, which it was fascinating for me. So I was suddenly connected to a very wide audience which could contribute to my project. That time my thesis was in a sort of draft section, but after that program I had to add an appendix, which was an extra 70 page to which I accumulated after that program. The most experience of sharing was that so far. And I'm doing a publication of that program. It's coming up end of September this year, book launch in showroom of the same program. That will be a larger distribution of that work. Sharing about the first archive you saw, the older one, is perfectly digitalized at International Institute of Social History. You just need to email them to have a copy or so, then they ask you for credit. It's a very generous institute, it's based in Amsterdam. After her death, Sadiqa Dolatabadi, which is founding mother of Iranian feminism, her family donated this to that archive, otherwise it wouldn't be available anymore. So it's so fascinating. She's not a photographer, it's mostly her writing which create that image. You feel how she was living, how she and her team were through those resistance, or it's incredible. I remember my first encounter, I was crying. I felt, suddenly I'm in my grandmother's basement and these are so private, but I'm reading through her handwritings, you see. Of that archive, I did an exhibition in Amsterdam last February. One of her writing, I turned it to a script, to a performance, and we did a performance piece based on that script. And then I showed some of the images. You remember, I installed some of the original photos of or documents, and also what I have created in response. If you need those images or things, all her magazines are digitalized by the institute itself. You can email me, or Lena, she can put you in touch with me. So, but just an overall, sharing in research is so important. I don't know, maybe not so many of you knew about Iran history or feminism history in Iran, but I think one does research, the next stage is how I can share this, because otherwise it would not be shared. You know, like if you didn't know about it, right? Thanks. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I have a question. I thank you for sharing all these nice images and words that you shared with us. And I also think it's nice that so quite diverse work meet under the umbrella of like feminist historiography. And I'm also then curious a little bit, I mean, in a way your answer partly was maybe already answering my question, but it's also interesting how you think of what is it then to graph or write a history. What path do you take through the material you find? Because one thing is the images and these archives that are gathered, but it's also very interesting I mean, I would ask all of you to comment on this. Why, in what sense do you think that you write history, or what's your thinking on this?
You write history.
In what sense we write history?
Do you need one of these?
I have one here.
Hello. Everybody is always writing. I mean, whatever thing you said has a relation to maybe the history that is the dominant history, or you choose another path. So it's always a writing and a rewriting of history. Please use the microphone. Because we're recording.
Sure.
I mean, writing history is always also a personal choice, or at least a choice in relation to a tradition, whether it's dominant or there are different paths. So I mean, it's also done here in the... So I would like you to, I mean, you could say that your work are already doing that, but I would also like to have your thoughts on a more general basis on this.
I can try to say something. I think maybe it's different for me because you work very sort of clearly with archive material and art, and I don't. But I mean, from what I understand from what you're saying, I would say that my take on this is that I'm interested in the what is that called in English? Urscener, typ. Primal scenes, maybe, of history. I mean, what I said, like in the introduction before I read, like that the poems are about the history of migration and racism and so on, and revolution. I would say that I was, while writing this book, I was interested in sort of extracting history and writing scenes, scenes that could be sort of applicable to many different historical circumstances. So it was very important for me, for instance, that it couldn't be read as the history of the Iranian Revolution or sort of the Iranian-Iraqi war, for instance, even though those experiences are maybe very sort of visual in the poem. It could also be read as something else. So sort of writing the scenes in history which repeat themselves rather than sort of a specific historical narrative, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I remember when I first read Athena's work, it was so powerful for me because it was a hidden side that is not written in the history. That was how her family was coping with those changes after revolutions, but also it was no time related. It could be for any time. So I was in the middle of a dining table in their home and witnessing the process of post-revolutionary Iran within a family setting. So it was very powerful for me. And being a visual artist, I could imagine all the same. I could create that visual within my mind, which is forever, mainly for all of us, sort of. But yeah, so, yeah, thank you.
But I also think that for me it's also been very much writing the history of feminist political imagery. So it's about kind of using what I perceive as their political imagination and endurance, and that is what I've been. That is what I was super interested. It was not. I mean, I'm mean, I'm an artist and not an historian, so it's rather the way the images trigger imagination, a political imagination, that that is the history I see myself writing. But I also, I should also say that what kind of what initiated my interest in this movement was that I started to look into the Folkets Hus-rörelse, People's House movement, which was the socialist movement that initiated the people houses, because they had nowhere to meet, no one let them in. So they said, fuck this, we build our own houses, we have our own meeting spaces. But within that writing, the history of Folkets Hus, women were not mentioned. And I was a bit surprised by that. And I asked a woman who has written the history of the Folkets Hus, where were the women? And she said, oh, they were kind of making coffee and arranging parties. And I was like, oh, this is strange. So I started to look into I stumbled over some posters, and I realized they were actually not only making coffee. They did make coffee, but they were not only making coffee. They were also actually really active as political subjects within the movements. And that's when that caught my interest, and I kind of wanted to learn more about that. And also when I started to look into that early movement, I also realized that I was quite ignorant about their claims, because a lot of the claims that I had till then thought were connected to the second wave movement, those claims were already there in the beginning of the 20th century. So, but these facts or these kind of ideas they are already present it's easy to find them. So that's what I mean. I'd rather see myself as writing the history of political imagination or imagery.
Wonderful. I add a little bit to that. I did a research practice space at the RCA, and for that I started with that historical fact I had to refer to. And for the beginning, it was about finding my own history as a woman growing up in Iran and wanting to know what has happened before us, why the certain things are in this way, and which makes me angry. So it was my personal interest of knowing more about my history, about the woman of my society. But this became accessible in another country, which was Britain. But being in art school, studying in a photography department, it was to leave the historical fact as a backdrop and go back and forth within creativity, which is creating film, writing fiction, trying to use indirection as a form of creation, which was abstracting. So I made a couple of video works which refer to that historical material directly, but also I have made work that refer to that as a form of abstract. So it's a combination of those. So it's an artist looking at historical event. So it's not the history of history being by historians, in my case. So maybe that is why I'm so fascinated with this material, and maybe this is my lifelong project forever, because I have so much material that I can delve into further.
I have a question. Sure. Because I stumbled upon a lot of archives that have been made by private persons, individuals, but also by artists. And many of these archives is kind of capturing a moment in history, the 90s, on the 20s, or the Second World War. And you stumbled on this archive in Berlin about the movement in Iran. I think that's fabulous. But there is something with these archives about women history that is getting lost many times. It disappears, it gets burned, people are throwing it away when people are dying. And I was just... many times I see the artists as kind of gatekeepers for these archives. I've seen it so many times. So, but can you comment on that? Because I think it's a huge problem today, and how do we act in the future regarding this? I don't know if you have any comments about it.
Yeah, sure. Do you want?
You can go.
Go. Yeah, you're quite right. I mean, I don't know if I wouldn't see that photo, if I wouldn't go through this, if I wouldn't have Royal College support, if I wouldn't go along the long 5 years. How did we know about that? Like, it just became possible by me encountering that photos, but also taking up that opportunity to research about it. But it's just a very micro part in the whole history of the world, and I believe it's so many interesting moments in history of each country that could be looked at. There are many artists who have worked with archives before, and through those dedications, we get to know about, oh, actually that has happened, and that is not correct, this was correct. So we can have an idea of what was exactly happening with that events. There are so many institutes sort of commission artists to work with sort of archive. Like the Frankfurt you just mentioned, we were commissioned by Clementine de Lis to visit the archive. So she invited 3 of us from the Royal College of Art to stay in the museum and work with the archive. It was one of the most generous experiences I have ever had. We were living on the 4th floor of the museum, and the archive was in the basement with the 24 hours access. And we were meant to create material out of that within the 1 month staying. It was incredible to be able to have such an intimate connection to material, to access to those material. And the photos you saw from that archive are incredible. And if they hadn't invited an Iranian artist, those were not interested for any other artists, right? So it's just a matter of if someone can see them. So many of the museums, maybe they are trying to digitalize or at least make details of what they have in their archive. But in Fetehrad Museum, where we were, they were boxes of boxes that they were not yet able to go through them, to categorize what they have. So there are also this matter of how do you know what we have in terms of archive? Or in your context, you said like it's a needle in the middle of chaos, right? So it's not all of them categorized, because there are so many negatives, so many material that need to be digitalized. I hope more artists could be interested in archive. If I want to comment is if there is budget to support artists to look back to their history and make it accessible, so it would be another way of rereading histories, or that would be my comment. Yeah. Do you have anything to?
Yeah, I think maybe the only thing I want to say is that, for example, when it comes to the labor movement archive in the National Labor Movement Archive in Stockholm, it's that the ones who kind of archive the material, they are trained historians. So what they are interested in, like, are minutes and other kind of written documents, and the posters and photographs, they are treated a bit kind of that's just kind of bonus material. They haven't really, and there's not been really. The historians haven't been interested in material because it's not fact-based enough, and also the art historians haven't been interested in material because it's not interesting enough, kind of visually interesting enough. So, and therefore the material hadn't been taken care of at all. It's like kind of it's a complete mess actually, and I thought that was kind of interesting because for me at least this material really. For me it speaks, and I'm a bit surprised that no one has been interested in it. And of course I make a very kind of artistic reading of it, so it would be interesting if a historian went more properly into it and looked at it. So that kind of was, and I thought that was interesting. So in that sense, of course, coming from a visual discipline, it also means that you bring a certain knowledge into your kind of into your research or into your kind of the way you treat a certain kind of material, which of course then gives you another history automatically. Yeah. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, sure.
One more. Yeah, so because you have studied the history of different women's movements and feminist movements and so, and we have seen how the contact between different generations, there is like a lack of contact in many ways, so that, you know, there are new generations that don't know what women and feminists have been doing earlier in history and so on. I would like to ask you if you have the feeling that we who are active today have a better understanding of the importance of documenting and writing our own history within the different feminist groups that are active now for future generations. If you have any insight in that question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Should I answer? Yeah, I mean, I didn't have enough time to spend with you all. The few contact I had during the making my tea over there was few friends that said to me, well, we didn't know about this. And it's so interesting that this has happened this way. And actually that was my purpose, because normally Iran history or feminist history goes under one umbrella, whale and all, but no. My whole attempt was and is to unfold this. It's more about it. There is more to do with it. And I haven't spent that much time to talk with you all. I would love to. But in terms of if I see you know about it, I think the only point is if you were present, now you know about it. And that's the whole purpose, because I tried to clarify that as much as I can during the project. And with the speakers that I was privileged to have, I think I tried to map it a bit further within the Swedish context, within the methodology all of us use in different angles to communicate a history of histories, right? And but I'm so grateful that Jaspis could have us here, and you could be part of this. Maybe you can talk about it with others if you meet people. And there are websites, there will be details of this on this Jaspis more later with video extract, but this is how it could be shared later. I have a talk at the Moderna Museum on 16th of September. That would be more specifically about my research, so that could be another option in a larger scale to share the project. If you are in Stockholm, please do come along and bring your friends so I can share with them this research. That's all I can say. You? No?
I'm not sure. I don't know what to answer. I don't have a good answer for that. But I mean, if you... but I think we should be careful about saying that the other generation have not been interested in history, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Because the socialist women's movement that you saw from the posters, they were talking about the women in French Revolution. They were talking about kind of women's history and feminist history. And then in the 70s, there are so many feminists that were our age in the 70s that referred back to the first wave, and also in the 70s. Like Rebecca and I found Alexandra Kollontai was really big in the 70s, and she has kind of disappeared now from the kind of a mainstream platform. So I don't know. I don't know if if we are suddenly the ones who remember our history. I'm not so sure about that. But I do think it's important to relate to what has happened over the years, and not to think that you can actually build on the legacy of other movements, but still kind of to access it through your own political context, which I also think is extremely important. But to learn from there or be inspired by, or however we want to think of it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No, we're not the only one, for sure. Just to add to.
We are actually coming close to having a break.
Okay.
But I have one last question before the break.
Yeah, sure.
And it was something that came up in the former break. Because I think, like you say, Petra, I think there is a real interest in history nowadays which is described, of course, obviously by how many artists that work with archives and history. But the question that came up in the break was actually about today. So expressing this great, I mean, how impressed you can be so impressed by this socialist, women's socialist movement that you described, Petra. But what happens today? What would be the equivalent today? Can we see this now? This is 100 years ago, roughly. So what is happening now? What would be the equivalent for... This was something that really shaped the future, we should know. We know by now it did. So what is happening? Which movement can we see today which can shape the future in a similar way?
Yes, of course. I would happy.
Say it's definitely the anti-racist movement and sort of the struggle, the asylum movement, I would say, is the most important movement in Sweden and in other European countries. I mean, really sort of taking parts of the struggles that will shape what our understanding of the nation as a notion in the future, for instance, or the citizen as a notion. I think this will be, I mean, immensely important, both very concretely important today when it comes to sort of finding shelters and helping people who are in desperate needs, but also I think it will be very important in shaping our understandings of different social matters in the future. Yes, this I am sure of. Yeah.
Okay.
So
should we have a break?
Question back.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So it's a 15-minute break, right?
Yeah, it's a 15-minute.